If you were to debrief that meeting, Ziyanda, what for you were the two highlights, things that really stood out?
The first thing was the president's demeanor and how it didn't turn into the circus that it was intended to become. And I think the second thing was, in a way, that how President Trump had specific people that he wanted to listen to more than our president, i.e. the golfers, Johan Rupert. That, for me, stood out, and it gives credence to the whole discussion around this whole issue of a so-called white genocide as an extension of Make America Great Again, which is underpinned by, right-wing racist conspiracy theories and white supremacy.
Yeah, and not even referring to the members of the executive who were actually in the room as well. TD, good morning to you as well. Your two standout moments in that Oval Office meeting, which some say will go down the history books.
Absolutely. Good morning, Ziyanda. Good morning, Aldrin, and to your viewers. I do think that the meeting will go down in history. The standout things for me is the sequence of events and the guests. Ziyanda speaks about the people allowed to speak. I still maintain that the golfers were not there at the behest of the South African government. I've said that all along. I maintain that. And you could see that in how Trump engaged them. The sequence of events didn't unfold the way that we were told it would unfold. They were meant to have had a meeting, had their lunch before speaking to the media. That was flipped upside down. And I think that's part and parcel of what was being done to kind of throw off the South African delegation to some extent. I was also taken aback by just how controlled, even though it's chaotic, but actually that's a very controlled engagement with a lot of security that even watches how journalists move in that small Oval Office. So those are the things that stood out for me. And of course, I can't not speak about the composure of our team. By our team, I mean our president, really.
Yeah, and speaking about the composure of the team, Tidi, I'm going to start off with you. Looking at how some people have reacted to that particular composure, some people saying that the president should have gone a bit further. The president should have perhaps maybe have been more aggressive, because this is a false allegation, especially when it comes to the white genocide issue, and we'll come back to that. This is a false allegation that is being made against your country. You should come across as more forceful. But the president, and now Kumbuto Chaveni as well, the minister in the presidency, saying that, listen, we had a clear plan and we wanted to achieve what we needed to achieve, and she believes that they have achieved that.
Yeah, I know that they've been called timid. It's so interesting looking at the South African perspective versus the American perspective. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of Americans post that engagement, and they were embarrassed by their president. South Africans are embarrassed by their president. So nobody's happy, depending on who you ask about performance. I do think that they needed to navigate it. You're going into the belly of a beast. You're going to be swept by a wave. You must make a decision about whether or not you're going to fight a wave or ride it through until it sweeps you to shore itself. And I think they made a decision to not fight the wave, because then you'll have a Zelensky moment. I think Ramaphosa's attempt to fight the white genocide, not to be the face of that, was to put John Steenhuisen as a response. And there, for me, was the lack of experience and I suppose the weakness on John Steenhuisen's part as a minister. I mean, he struggled to figure out in that moment, where do you stand for your country versus your constituency's demands as a member of the DA, trying to hold their line around expropriation versus actually national duty in that moment. So I do think that there was a strategy. They attempted to stick to a strategy. People are critical of it. I don't know if there was room, Aldrin, to go, no, but the stats say this, the stats say that. I couldn't see that because he wasn't willing to listen to Ramaphosa. They wouldn't even allow him in some instances to give a response. You remember hearing me scream, give Ramaphosa a chance to speak. So that wasn't also there.
Yeah, and Ziyanda, from that, we ahead of that meeting had spoken about the inclusion of John Steenhuisen in that delegation, which obviously also came at a later stage. John was the only minister actually that got an opportunity to speak during that meeting.
Yeah.
What do you draw from how he performed during that moment? TD speaks about his constituency, but what about the South Africa which you are representing as Minister of Agriculture.
I agree fully with TD in terms of, John Steenhuisen's performance. The whole point of him being there, and I mean, I'd spoken to him the day before at the South African Embassy in Washington about the fact that, look, you are a white man who is the agriculture minister, who's also leading the second biggest party in the government of national unity. And as agriculture minister, you're the custodian of farmers, but in particular, these white farmers. And I asked him, is that not going to be your key role there? And, to talk about keeping EFF and MK party out of government, I felt, missed the moment. Just the previous week, they had received 49 white Afrikaners. He didn't emphasize the fact that, firstly, those so-called white Afrikaners are not farmers. We've had several media reports proving that those people who are welcomed under that refugee status are not farmers in the first instance. The second thing here is to talk about to repeat what he said at that Nampo festival, where he was quite clear that there is no white genocide and that he had emphasized that that would be his line in the Oval Office, which didn't come through. And this is why TD is also talking about a constituency, because he got quite a lot of backlash, from his constituency about actually maintaining that particular view. So I think showing up in that moment, not so great, insofar as being Team South Africa. And that's why I think there's also a lot of conversation around whether or not there was a strategy, whether in terms of which hymn sheets are they going to be singing from, and that everybody sticks to that particular script, because one anticipated that when President Ramaphosa deferred to John Steenhuisen that he would come out quite boldly, given how at some stage Trump was quite attentive to those in the room.
Okay. Quickly, ladies, starting off with you, Ziyanda. We also had Zingisa Losi, then we had Johan Rupert as well that got
Yes.
an opportunities to speak. For me, the ones that are really standing out. What do you take out of that? What do you take out of their contribution in that meeting?
I think Johan Rupert, barring almost advertising for Starlink that some people say, it wasn't his space to say we need this technology. I think he showed up quite well, was quite clear on the issue of crime and it affecting everyone. The same can be said about, Zingi Swalosi. Was the language okay? Well, that's up to South Africans to decide. I know that some have criticized Losi for saying that we are a violent nation, but at the end of the day, they had to portray a particular message across when they got given an opportunity to speak. And I think, Algin, before I finish off my point, you must also look at how restrained the U.S. delegation side was. You didn't hear from J.D. Vance the same way you did when Zelensky was in the Oval Office. You didn't hear from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who in the days leading up to that moment had been saying all manner of things in the Senate, in a CBS interview, doubling down, saying they want to extend the scope of this, refugee program. They didn't speak. Elon Musk was muzzled by Trump, in essence. So that is also, in a way, a success that we must look at. So, yes, we can criticize some of the things that were said by the South African delegation. I think Johan Rupert, barring almost advertising for Starlink that some people say, it wasn't his space to say we need this technology. I think he showed up quite well, was quite clear on the issue of crime and it affecting everyone. The same can be said about, Zingi Swalosi. Was the language okay? Well, that's up to South Africans to decide. I know that some have criticized Losi for saying that we are a violent nation, but at the end of the day, they had to portray a particular message across when they got given an opportunity to speak. And I think, Algin, before I finish off my point, you must also look at how restrained the U.S. delegation side was. You didn't hear from J.D. Vance the same way you did when Zelensky was in the Oval Office. You didn't hear from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who in the days leading up to that moment had been saying all manner of things in the Senate, in a CBS interview, doubling down, saying they want to extend the scope of this, refugee program. They didn't speak. Elon Musk was muzzled by Trump, in essence. So that is also, in a way, a success that we must look at. So, yes, we can criticize some of the things that were said by the South African delegation.